Tonight, in cities from Houston to Charleston, millions of people are going to lie down in 80-degree bedrooms and try to sleep. Their fans will push hot air in circles. Their bodies will attempt to recover from a day that hit 103, 105, 108 degrees. And they will not recover. Not tonight, not tomorrow night, not for at least another week. That is the core of what we are dealing with right now across the American South. This is not a hot stretch of summer weather. This is a heat event that is denying the human body the single window it needs to survive prolonged exposure to extreme temperatures. That window is nighttime. And this heat wave has taken it away completely. Let me tell you exactly what is happening and why it matters more than any single afternoon high temperature ever will. The atmosphere over the southern United States is being controlled right now by one dominant feature. There is a powerful upper-level ridge anchored over the Four Corners region, and it is doing something that I have not seen sustain this well in the middle of August for a very long time. It is not moving. The Weather Prediction Center issued its extended forecast discussion on Monday of this week and used unusually direct language. The phrase they used was, "Long-duration heat wave continues across the southern tier." They projected 500 millibar heights exceeding 597 decameters over the Four Corners region through the end of this week and into next. That is a number that forecasters pay very close attention to. When you see heights like that, anchored and stationary, you are looking at a heat dome that has locked the door behind it. The mechanism is straightforward but brutal. When high pressure sits overhead, air sinks. Sinking air compresses, compressed air warms. The heat dome acts like a lid on a pot, and the sun has been pouring energy into that pot every single day, while the lid keeps it from escaping. What builds up underneath is an air mass that is several degrees above normal at every level of the atmosphere, from the surface all the way up. That is what you are living under right now across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Heat indices, which measure what the air actually feels like to your body when you factor in humidity, have been running from 105 to 115 degrees across a wide swath of the South. The AccuWeather Real Feel has pushed to 115 in some locations. The Gulf waters are pumping moisture inland continuously, and that moisture is not evaporating. It is stacking up against the heat dome and creating conditions where the heat index in downtown Memphis, in Baton Rouge, in Savannah, in Charlotte, simply refuses to fall to a manageable level even after midnight. Now here is the part that most weather coverage is not giving you enough time on, and this is the thing I want you to hold on to for the rest of this video. The daytime high temperatures in this event are dangerous, but they are not the most dangerous element. What is actually most dangerous about this heat wave is what the temperature does after sunset. In Houston, overnight lows have been struggling to drop below 78 or 79 degrees. In the core of larger metro areas, we have seen lows sitting in the low 80s. Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Tampa, Galveston, and Charleston are all forecast by the National Weather Service to see overnight lows that will not drop below 80 degrees through the duration of this event. That is not a low temperature. That is a heat advisory temperature. The reason this matters so much comes down to human biology. Your core body temperature needs to drop during sleep. It needs time to reset. When the air around you stays at 80 degrees through the night, and you go back into 110-degree heat index conditions the following afternoon, your body never had the recovery window. Heat stress accumulates day after day. That is what the research shows. That is what the death statistics show every single time a sustained heatwave grips a major population centre without overnight relief. Heat is already the #1 weather killer in the United States. It kills more people every year than tornadoes and hurricanes combined. And the version of heat that kills is not one hot afternoon. It is 5, 6, 7 consecutive days and nights where there is no break. The Climate Prediction Center designated the lower Mississippi River Valley under extreme heat risk. That is the highest category on the combined NOAA and CDC extreme heat scale. The specific language associated with that designation says it is a long-duration heat wave with little or no overnight relief that can be dangerous for anyone without access to cooling and adequate hydration. Anyone, not just the elderly, not just the vulnerable. Anyone. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to know where you are watching from and what your overnight temperatures have been doing. If you are in the south and your lows are staying in the upper 70s or above, I want to know. Here is the geographic scope of this event, right now on August 19th, and here is who needs to watch this most closely. Southern Arkansas and the area around Little Rock are at the center of what may become one of the most historically documented heat wave periods in state history. The National Weather Service in North Little Rock began issuing unusually strong language over a week ago. Their forecast anticipated at least 10 consecutive days with temperatures reaching 100 degrees or higher at the Little Rock Airport. The record for the most consecutive 100-degree days in Little Rock is 15 days, set in August of 1980. 1980 is a number that meteorologists use as a benchmark. It was a catastrophic summer. The state is now tracking to rival that stretch, and as of the forecaster discussion updated Monday morning, medium confidence remains that dangerous heat will persist through August 24th. Even with some cloud cover reducing the chance of hitting the full 10-day streak of triple digits, forecasters said we should be looking at probably 8 days in a row. 8 consecutive days above 100 degrees in central Arkansas, with overnight temperatures near 80. That is not a heat advisory situation. That is a public health emergency. Eastern Texas into the Gulf Coast is also fully locked in. Houston has had temperatures running 5 to 7 degrees above normal through this stretch, with overnight lows in the upper 70s to near 80. The National Weather Service in Houston issued blunt guidance this week. Fans will not cut it when it comes to cooling your home or your bodies. That is rare language from a federal forecast office. It means what it says. Moving east, the situation in southern Georgia and coastal South Carolina is producing heat index values that reached 110 to 112 degrees earlier this week. Charleston hit 100 degrees on Tuesday. Charleston, South Carolina, a city on the Atlantic coast, right where the sea breeze is supposed to give some measure of relief. The feels-like temperature in Charleston that afternoon was 112 degrees. That is nearly the temperature of a very hot shower maintained for hours across an entire city. The Florida Panhandle and areas around Memphis, Jonesboro, Batesville, Conway, Searcy, and the Tennessee Valley have all been under extreme heat warnings, not just advisories. An extreme heat warning is the top tier. It is issued when dangerous, potentially lethal conditions are expected. I am Arthur, and you are watching US Weather Threat. If this kind of high-stakes weather breakdown is what you want every day, hit that subscribe button right now. The members of this channel, and I want to specifically acknowledge Stephen Brown and Lone Frylock, who have both been with us through a stretch of some of the most active weather coverage we have ever done. They get access to extended discussions when things escalate to this level. Every new member who joins has their name and handle displayed on screen in the very next video. That is how we build this community. Hit join if you want to be part of that. Now let us stay in this data, because the 7-day outlook from here is something you need to understand in full. Today is Wednesday, August 19th. Here is how the next 7 days are likely to unfold across the South and the central United States. Through Thursday, August 20th, the upper high remains centered over the Four Corners. That means the South continues to bake. High temperatures across southern Oklahoma, southern Arkansas, western Mississippi, northern Louisiana, and north-central through eastern Texas are expected to reach the upper 90s to 105 degrees. Heat index values will peak at 110 to 115 degrees across those areas. This is not the worst day of the week. Thursday comes close. Thursday into Friday, the ridge begins a very slow shift. The Weather Prediction Center discussion notes that ridging will be expanding north across the Intermountain West, while also shifting a bit east into the high plains next week. That shift is important because it tells us where relief eventually enters this picture and where the next area of hazardous heat moves. For the South on Friday, August 21st, the National Weather Service flagged this as one of the peak risk days in the entire event. The Climate Prediction Center had already flagged August 19th through 21st as the highest risk window from the central and southern plains through the Mississippi Valley and into the southeast. If you are in Memphis, Jackson, Shreveport, Birmingham, Atlanta, or Columbia, Friday is your watch day. Heat index values could touch 115 degrees again across the Tennessee and lower Mississippi valleys on that day. Over the weekend, August 22nd and 23rd, the southeast begins to see some change. Troughing is expected to slowly deepen in the east, and that is eventually going to begin to lessen the heat grip on portions of the Carolinas and into Georgia. But slowly. Do not expect the weekend to feel dramatically different. What the models are showing is a gradual erosion of the worst conditions in the eastern portions of the risk zone, while the south-central plains and lower Mississippi Valley stay locked in. Now here is where it gets complicated, and I will explain exactly why in just a moment. The week beginning Monday, August 24th, is where the forecast diverges between models. The GFS has been building the ridge back into the Great Plains, which would keep above normal heat across Texas, Oklahoma, and the southern tier. The European model is a bit quicker in pushing the trough eastward, which could bring slightly more relief to the southeast earlier in that period. But even the more optimistic European solution does not show a clean end to this heat event across the southern plains through the end of August. The Climate Prediction Center Probabilistic Hazards Outlook updated this week stated that there continues to be elevated chances for extreme heat conditions persisting into the week 2 period throughout the southern tier. The GFS and ECMWF both favour 500 millibar heights exceeding 597 decameters across the Four Corners region through the period. Both models are in agreement on the broad pattern. They are simply disagreeing on the exact timing of any eastward shift. Here is what I think about this disagreement. When both models are this close together on a long-duration heat dome, and the only question is the exact timing of the exit, I tend to lean toward the slower solution when we have the Gulf waters this warm, contributing continuous moisture, and when the upper high has already demonstrated this level of persistence. I think the south-central plains stays hot through at least August 25th, and I think any relief that reaches the southeast will be slower and less dramatic than the European model would suggest in its more optimistic runs. By August 26th through the end of the month, I am watching for a potential reconnection of heat into the Great Plains as the subtropical ridge retrograde pattern the CPC discussed takes hold. That means the heat core could essentially loop back over the southern tier rather than departing cleanly. That is not guaranteed, but the signal in the guidance is real enough that I will not tell you this heat is over. Not yet. Now, a word about the drought that is developing underneath this heat wave. Because this is the second major threat embedded in this event, and it is getting almost no attention in mainstream coverage. The Climate Prediction Center identified a rapid onset drought risk across parts of the central and southern plains and the middle and lower Mississippi Valley. Rapid onset drought, or flash drought, is the rapid intensification of drought conditions driven by lower than normal rainfall combined with abnormally high temperatures, high winds, and strong solar radiation. All of those elements are present right now. Some areas of the south have received at least 2 inches less rainfall than normal over the past 30 days. That deficit, combined with daily temperatures at or above 100 degrees and overnight dew points in the upper 60s to low 70s, is pulling moisture out of the soil at an accelerating rate. The National Weather Service briefing out of North Little Rock said that soil moisture and small creeks or streams could see major to extreme impact. They also said potable water resources may become strained in some parts of the state. That is not routine Weather Service language. That tells me the forecasters closest to this situation are genuinely concerned about infrastructure strain. Have you ever watched a region go from normal conditions to drought in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because that is what the CPC is saying is possible right now across the Mid-South. The wildfire angle here is also something I am tracking. The Arkansas Department of Agriculture had 25 counties at high risk of wildfires as of Monday. Burn bans are in place in multiple counties. When you combine record heat, flash drought development, and winds that accompany the edges of the heat dome, you get elevated fire weather conditions, even in states that are not typically associated with major wildfires in August. Arkansas, Mississippi, parts of Tennessee. These are states that do not have the wildland firefighting infrastructure of the western United States. A fast-moving fire in that environment under these conditions is worth taking seriously. Now let me zoom back out to the big picture, because there is a pattern-level story behind this specific event that you need to understand. And this is the part that explains why this summer has felt so relentless for so much of the country. The summer of 2026 has been dominated by a repeating pattern of heat dome formation and reformation across the southern and central United States. This is not the first heat dome of the summer. The first major dome struck the eastern United States during the 4th of July week, pushing Atlantic City to 106 degrees on Independence Day and knocking out power to roughly 250,000 customers in New Jersey alone. 44 deaths were attributed to that first wave. A second dome followed. And now this dome, which forecasters are describing as a long-duration event across the southern tier, is the latest chapter in what has been an extraordinary summer. The driver of this persistence is El Niño. The Ninyo 3.4 index is approaching +1, which puts us in the range of moderate El Niño status, and the sea surface temperature anomalies across the equatorial Pacific continue to warm. The National Weather Service found El Niño conditions present in June and flagged the possibility of what some researchers have called a super El Niño developing as the year progresses. El Niño suppresses Atlantic hurricane activity by increasing wind shear. But on the other side of that equation, it enhances the subtropical jet across the southern tier of the United States and contributes to the pattern of persistent heat ridging that we have seen all summer. What El Niño does to summer heat is not always fully explained in the coverage. The enhanced subtropical ridge that El Niño tends to support essentially gives heat domes a more stable and persistent atmosphere to park in. The high-pressure systems are less likely to be disrupted by the kind of weather disturbances that would normally crack them apart after 3 or 4 days. That is what I am watching with this current event. The upper high is not getting dislodged. It is retrograding slowly, shifting its position, but the overall ridge pattern is holding with unusual tenacity. The GFS ensembles through the end of August continue to show above-average temperatures for virtually the entire southern tier of the United States. The ECMWF ensemble mean tells a similar story. The Climate Impact Company noted midday this week that the GFS is maintaining an arc of heavy rain and severe weather across the upper Midwest and Mid-Atlantic, while the Mid-South heat intensifies through the day's 6 through 10 window and then widens from the Great Plains to the southeast in the 11 through 15-day range. This is one of the strongest and most persistent summer ridge patterns I have seen dominate the southern United States in several years, and the Gulf waters underneath all of this are playing a direct role. Sea surface temperatures across the Gulf are above average. Warm Gulf waters do not just feed potential tropical systems, they feed the continuous moisture transport that keeps dew points elevated across the south, which is what prevents overnight cooling. Every night that the Gulf pushes warm, moist air inland, the overnight low temperatures in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia have a floor they simply cannot drop below. That floor is currently sitting between 78 and 82 degrees in the largest metro areas. I want to circle back to one number before I wrap up the big picture section. 70 deaths. That is the toll attributed to the 2026 North American heatwave as of the first week of August, according to available reporting. 44 of those deaths came in the 4th of July event. That number will not stay static as this current southern heatwave continues to unfold. Heat deaths are often undercounted in real time and revised upward weeks or months later. The history of major American heatwaves shows this consistently. The 1980 heatwave, which Little Rock is currently trying not to rival, is estimated to have killed more than 1,200 people across the country. Many of those deaths were in the South. Many of them happened in communities without reliable air conditioning access. That vulnerability is still present today. The advice from forecasters in North Little Rock this week was direct. Try to get your body at least a few hours of cooling every day. That is the bar they are asking people to meet. Just a few hours. That is how serious this is. If you are checking on neighbours, checking on elderly family members, making sure people without reliable air conditioning have a plan, you are doing the right thing. This is not a storm you can see on a radar. It does not look like anything. The sky is clear and sunny. That is the deception of extreme heat. It kills quietly, and it kills the people who are already most exposed. For the next video, I will be watching two things very closely. First, the exact timing of the cold front that the Weather Prediction Center is tracking for next week. That front and the associated trough deepening in the east is the most plausible near-term relief mechanism for the southeast. How fast it moves and how far south it pushes will determine whether communities in Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee get relief in the August 23rd to 25th window, or whether they have to wait another few days beyond that. Second, I am watching the flash drought development across the Mid-South and whether the CPC upgrades any of the drought risk language in their next update. If you want that breakdown as soon as I have it, I will have it ready for you. But first, let me complete the picture on where this pattern is heading and why the drought angle may end up being the longer-lasting consequence of this entire heat event. Let me go deeper on the city-level picture for today and tomorrow, because the general overview does not fully capture what individual communities are experiencing inside this heat dome. In Shreveport, Louisiana, today's high temperature is expected to reach 103 degrees. The heat index in Shreveport will likely approach 112. Shreveport sits in a part of northwestern Louisiana where Gulf moisture combines with the heat dome to create some of the most extreme heat index values in the country. The National Weather Service office covering that region has been under continuous heat advisory and warning coverage for the better part of 2 weeks now. Jackson, Mississippi is in a similar situation. Highs in the upper 90s to around 100 degrees, with heat index values in the 108 to 112 range. The western Mississippi area, identified by WeatherBug as one of the core zones within the heat dome, has been consistently recording feels-like temperatures in the 100 to 110 range since at least August 12th. Move east to the Atlanta metro. Atlanta sits at a higher elevation than coastal Georgia, which usually provides some modest buffer. Not this week. The GFS and the European model both show Atlanta seeing highs in the mid to upper 90s through Thursday and Friday. Heat index values in Atlanta are forecast to push into the 105 to 108 range during peak afternoon hours. Atlanta is a massive urban heat island. The urban core radiates heat stored in pavement and buildings throughout the night, which is one of the reasons why overnight temperatures in the city centre are going to be consistently 5 to 8 degrees warmer than outlying suburbs. A person living in a top-floor apartment in downtown Atlanta this week without air conditioning is in a genuinely dangerous situation. Charleston, South Carolina, which I mentioned earlier, deserves more time. What happened there on Tuesday was striking. 100 degrees in a coastal city. The sea breeze that normally moderates summer temperatures in coastal South Carolina was overwhelmed by the heat dome. The onshore flow from the Atlantic, which typically drops coastal temperatures 5 to 10 degrees compared to inland areas, could not overcome the depth and intensity of the ridge overhead. A 112-degree heat index in Charleston is the kind of number you see maybe twice in a decade, if that. The fact that it is happening in mid-August, after a summer that has already included multiple heat dome events, tells you something about the cumulative nature of this pattern. Now let me also address an area that is not getting the same attention as the Deep South, but that is genuinely in play here. The lower Mississippi River Valley between Memphis and New Orleans. This corridor runs through western Tennessee, the western toe of Kentucky, the full length of Mississippi, and into southern Louisiana. The lower Mississippi River Valley was designated under extreme heat risk by the Climate Prediction Center on Monday. The specific criteria for extreme heat risk requires a combination of high daytime temperatures and high overnight temperatures sustained over multiple days, with documented probability of heat-related illness beyond what historical climatology would expect. The lower Mississippi Valley met that threshold. Memphis, Greenville, Vicksburg, Natchez, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans are all inside that designation. I have seen the extreme heat risk category applied to the Southwest in June and July. Seeing it applied to the lower Mississippi Valley in August, a region that is unquestionably accustomed to summer heat, tells me the meteorologists at the CPC are genuinely alarmed about what is unfolding here. Let me also flag something that the NWS Houston office said this week that I think deserves to be repeated verbatim. Actually, I will not do verbatim, but the substance of what they said was this. The wet bulb globe temperature, or WBGT, which factors in temperature, humidity, wind, and direct sunlight, is expected to reach 90 or 91 degrees in the Houston area during afternoon hours this week. The WBGT scale marks values of 90 and above as dangerous for strenuous outdoor activity, particularly between early afternoon and 4 in the afternoon. If you work outside in Houston this week, that guidance applies directly to you. Construction workers, landscapers, delivery drivers, agricultural workers, the afternoon hours on Wednesday and Thursday are the most dangerous windows of the day. Now back to the 7-day outlook, because I want to complete that day-by-day picture with more precision. Saturday, August 22nd. This is the day the models begin to disagree most sharply. The European model has been more aggressive in introducing the trough on the eastern seaboard, which would begin pulling cooler air into the Carolinas and potentially Georgia by the second half of the weekend. The GFS has been slower. If the European model solution verifies, residents in Charleston, Wilmington, and Raleigh could see heat index values drop from the 110+ range to a far more manageable mid to upper 90s by Saturday afternoon. That is still hot, but it is a meaningful departure from what we have been seeing. If the GFS is right and the trough is slower, Saturday looks nearly identical to the preceding days across the eastern southeast. For the plains on Saturday, the GFS keeps the ridge firmly in place over the south-central tier. Dallas, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and Wichita are all expected to see highs in the mid to upper 90s through the weekend. The heat index in Dallas on Saturday could reach 108. Triple-digit heat in Texas, extending into Oklahoma, is not unusual in August. But what is unusual is the duration. If we are sitting here on August 22nd and 23rd, still talking about 100-degree plus heat indices in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, this becomes one of the longest sustained heat events for that region in several years. Sunday, August 23rd. The trough deepening in the east that the WPC discussed should be more apparent by this point. The eastern seaboard from Washington through the Carolinas may begin to see rain and thunderstorm development associated with the front. That activity will not immediately cool things down. Convective rainfall can temporarily reduce temperatures, but the moisture increase it brings can sometimes make the overnight heat index feel even worse before the front fully clears. Pay attention to the specific timing of frontal passage for your area on Sunday. Monday and Tuesday, August 24th and 25th. This is where the CPC has medium confidence in the beginning of some reduction in heat extremes across the southeast. The language is medium confidence, which I respect. It is an honest assessment of how uncertain model guidance gets at that range with a blocking ridge like this one. The south-central plains through the lower Mississippi Valley is likely to remain at or above normal through this entire period and into the final week of August. I want to bring you back to the big picture one more time, because there is a data point I held back earlier, and I want to give it to you now. According to reporting out of the KARK meteorology team in Arkansas, if Little Rock had hit the full 10 consecutive days of 100 degrees that was initially forecast, 2026 would have finished in second place all time for the longest such streak in the city's history. August 1980 holds the record with 15 consecutive days. The summer of 1980 across the South was catastrophic. The 1980 heat wave is estimated to have contributed to well over 1,000 deaths nationally. It remains one of the most studied weather disasters in American climatological history. The fact that forecasters were using 1980 as a comparison point even before this current stretch peaked tells you everything about where this event sits in a historical context. The Arkansas radio reporting from late July noted something that I think is the most important single sentence I have read in any weather coverage this summer. It said that repeated days of extreme heat followed by nighttime temperatures near 80 degrees create a cumulative strain on the human body that is distinct from a heat wave in which nights cool down. That distinction is the whole story. A 104-degree day followed by a 68-degree night is uncomfortable and potentially dangerous for vulnerable populations. A 104-degree day followed by an 81-degree night is dangerous for everyone. That is what this event is delivering to the South night after night. Since the beginning of summer 2026, approximately 280 million Americans, more than 85% of the entire country, have experienced above average or well above average temperatures at some point. That number comes from climate hazard reporting reviewed earlier this month. 2.8 million Americans saw below average temperatures over the same period. That asymmetry is extraordinary. It tells you this is not a regional heat story. It is a summer-wide pattern story with a southern core that has now been running without a genuine break for more than 2 months. I want to address one more thing before the outro, because it keeps coming up in the comments and I want to give you a clear answer. People are asking whether this is the worst summer for heat in American history. The honest meteorological answer right now is not yet confirmed, and we will not know until the data from August 31st is compiled and analysed by the National Centres for Environmental Information. What we can say with confidence is that this summer has produced multiple major heat dome events sequentially. It has pushed cities like Little Rock, Atlanta, and Charleston to near-historic heat index extremes in the same calendar season. It has driven the Climate Prediction Center to issue extreme heat risk designations for the lower Mississippi Valley in August. And it has created conditions favorable for rapid onset drought across the Mid-South simultaneously with the peak of the heat. That combination, extreme sustained heat plus drought acceleration plus no overnight relief for extended periods, is the signature of the historically dangerous summers in the American record. Whether this one formally rivals 1980 will depend on what September brings. But what August has already delivered to the south is serious enough to document and take seriously on its own terms. Tomorrow I will have updated model runs for you, and I will be watching the timing of that cold front very closely. The difference between the European and GFS solutions for the August 23rd through 25th window could determine whether some of the worst affected communities get even a few days of relief before the pattern potentially reasserts. That specific question, when does the southeast finally get a night below 75 degrees, is what I'm going to have an answer to for you tomorrow. Make sure you have notifications turned on for US weather threat. Like this video if the breakdown was useful to you. Drop your city in the comments. I want to know how your overnight temperatures have been this week, and I will see you in the next one. One more piece of this story that I want you to have before you close this video. The wildfire risk developing across Arkansas and the Mid-South right now is an underreported consequence of this heat wave, and it is worth your attention even if you are not in a fire-prone area of the country. As of Monday, 25 counties in Arkansas were at high risk of wildfire danger, according to the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. Burn bans are in place across multiple counties. The Arkansas Forestry Division have been tracking the risk through the peak of the heat wave, and the combination of prolonged heat, depleted soil moisture, and low relative humidity during afternoon hours creates conditions where a single ignition source can escalate quickly. Now, Arkansas is not California. The South generally has more humidity and denser vegetation than the western fire zones, but flash drought changes the calculus significantly. When soil moisture is pulled out rapidly over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, the vegetation that normally acts as a moisture buffer becomes tinder. Grasses dry out, forest understory becomes combustible. The same Gulf moisture that drives the overnight heat index does not prevent surface vegetation from drying out during 100-degree afternoon hours when relative humidity drops to 20 or 30% during the hottest part of the day. I have been watching fire weather conditions in the south this summer with more attention than I normally would at this time of year. The combination of the drought signal from the CPC, the burn ban activity across Arkansas, and the 10 to 15-day above normal temperature forecast for the entire region tells me fire risk is a secondary hazard of this heat event that will likely get more attention in the coming days. The NWS Houston office also flagged wildfire concerns for southeast Texas this week, which is another location not typically associated with major fire weather. Southeast Texas, into the coastal plain area, normally has enough Gulf moisture to suppress wildfire risk. But extended dry periods combined with 100-degree heat changes that baseline. If you are in the Gulf Coast region and you have dry vegetation near your home, this week is not the time to ignore the possibility. The bottom line for today, August 19th, is this. The South is in the middle of a sustained and potentially historic heat event, defined not just by extreme daytime temperatures, but by the denial of overnight recovery. The overnight low problem is the most dangerous feature of this wave, and the one that will determine the ultimate health toll when final data comes in after this event concludes. The upper high is anchored, the models agree it stays in place through at least the 21st at full strength, and any relief for the southeast will come gradually from a trough deepening in the east, rather than from any dramatic breakdown of the pattern. The south-central plains and lower Mississippi Valley will wait longer for that relief, likely into the final week of August. Stay alert, stay cool, and stay with US weather threat.